Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict in the territory of Ukraine, and we have the most important question, whether the Ukrainians are going to attack the territory of Russia, the territory of Moscow, the Red Square, the Kremlin between the 8th and the 9th of May or not. And the question is whether the Russians are ready for this and whether the Russians are ready to strike back. As for the first question regarding the Russian Federation and the city of Moscow, one thing is clear: the city of Moscow is ready, but the question is whether the Ukrainians are ready or not is still without answer. So let's discuss everything in details. As you can see, according to this map, the Russians have reinforced their air defense positions around the city of Moscow. Dozens, maybe even hundreds of air defense systems were recorded in the area of the city of Moscow, which means that the Ukrainians have less and less chances to break through this layered air defense and to attack the Kremlin or to attack the Red Square during the parade. But the question is whether the Ukrainians are going to do this, whether they're going to use missiles and drones to attack Russia, because they understand that even if they don't break through the Russia's layered air defense, most likely the Russians will strike back. But it seems, and we know that the Ukrainians don't have such a layered air defense system around the city of Kyiv. Very important question, and yesterday in the evening the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, probably according to this video, gave us some answer. He said that Russia has broken the ceasefire. Ukraine will respond symmetrically depending on the situation tonight, and tomorrow we will also decide on our further responses. Russia has fought itself into a position where even their main parade now depends on us. So according, of course, to this statement, it seems that Zelensky most likely will give this order to attack the city of Moscow during the 9th of May, but different sources stated that maybe he won't do this. For example, a BBC source in Kyiv denied media reports that Zelensky has decided to reject Putin's proposed ceasefire for May 8th and 9th. The Ukrainian leadership has not yet made a decision, the source stated. Earlier, the Kyiv Independent, citing a senior Ukrainian official, wrote that Ukraine simply sees no point regarding the parade. However, BBC source denied this. The president hasn't yet made a decision regarding May 9th. He makes his decision day by day under these circumstances, meaning if they attack today, then we will to tomorrow, the source stated. So according to this article, according to this analysis, according to the statement of Zelensky himself, we see that the main logic and the most important question for Zelensky and for Ukraine, whether the Russians attack Ukraine between the 7th and the 6th of May, and if it or not. If it happens, if Russians attack Ukraine during the 6th and the 7th of May, then most likely Ukraine will strike back during the 8th and the 9th of May of 2026. But this is not the logic. This is just a media version. This is just a version for the internet, for different sources and so on. The real situation is much more complicated, and everything, as I understand, depends not on the Russian strikes or something like this. Everything depends on a bit different situation. I will try to explain to you what is going to happen next. And to understand the next steps, both of the Russians and the Ukrainians, first of all, let's discuss the statement that was made by the spokeswoman of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Maria Zakharova. Yesterday in the evening, she emphasized that the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs called on foreign authorities to evacuate their citizens and diplomats from Kyiv in advance. When reading these words, these sentences, we can say that the Russians are trying to probably make the situation when the losses among the foreign peoples and diplomats would be minimal. So that is why they're asking them to leave the city of Kyiv in advance. But this is not the situation. I'll try to explain to you. Let's continue with the statement. The European Union is gravely mistaken if it thinks it can silence Zelensky's public threats to strike Moscow. The Russian Minister of Defense's warning was issued specifically in response to Zelensky's statements. If Kyiv carries out criminal plans during the Victory Day celebrations, the strike will also target decision-making centers. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasizes the inevitability of a retaliatory strike by the Russian armed forces. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has sent a call to all foreign diplomatic missions to take the Ministry of Defense's statement seriously regarding Kyiv's threats. So what exactly Maria Zakharova was talking about? Let's discuss this in details and you will understand then everything, and we will understand the answer to the question whether the Ukrainians are going to attack or not. And to understand this, of course, we need to see, and we know that the current 9th of May, which is going to start the day after tomorrow, is not the first 9th of May since the beginning of the special military operation. So there were at least 4 9ths of May since the beginning of the conflict, and this one is not the first one. So that is why we know how these things, how the things develop during these days, and what the Russians do during the 9th of May since the beginning of the special military operation, and what the Ukrainians do. And the most important thing, that every single 8th of May and every single 9th of May, when talking about Ukraine, the foreign leaders and foreign diplomats visit the territory of Ukraine. And this is the most important thing. And for example, the last year, there was a meeting, big European summit on the territory of Lvov, and Zelensky stated that this summit was represented of over more than 40 countries. They gathered in Lviv and they created something like a tribunal for the Russians or something like this. For example, in this picture of Lvov of the 9th of May of 2025, we can see Kaya Kallas in the city of Lvov. Here we have report that the German foreign minister of new merged government, Jonathan Van der Poel, will visit Ukraine during the 8th and the 9th of May. So there were lots of European politicals, lots of from different countries, from Germany, from the European Union itself, from the NATO organization, from Baltic states, from Poland, from Italy, from Spain, from the United Kingdom. So there were more than 40 countries represented in 2025 on the 9th of May. So this is the answer, and this is exactly the answer, because Zelensky, he thinks that the best air defense system and the best air defense force for Ukraine that's shown the best results since the beginning of the special military operation is a human shield, not the population, of course, not the citizens of Ukraine, but we're talking about a human shield consists of the European and, of course, if possible, the North American politicals, Canadians, the United States of America, politicals, Witkov, Kushner, Macron, Merz, Scholz, Meloni, Keir Starmer, and of course Macron. If they visit the territory of Ukraine, the Russians never attack Ukraine during these meetings and so on. So this is the most important question, and this is exactly what will be the final thing Zelensky will use to make his final decision to attack or not to attack. Now, as I understand, Zelensky is trying to convince and trying to probably even force European leaders and European politicals to come to Ukraine once again this year as well. On the 9th of May, he called for everybody to come to Ukraine and to gather once again to create another tribunal or to make another European summit or something like this, where they will blame Russians in all sins and so on. But it seems that according to information we have, nobody from Europe is going to visit Kyiv this year. And this is exactly what the spokeswoman of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation was talking about. The Russians called to every single embassy of every single country in the world, and they told them not to send their diplomats, not to send the representatives of their authorities, prime ministers, ministers of defense, or finance ministers, and so on to Ukraine. Don't send anybody, because Zelensky will use this situation to attack the territory of Russia, and of course the Russians, according to the previous years, would not attack back. But now the Russians warned the Europeans that this year everything changes. This year, if Ukraine attacks the territory of the Russian Federation during the 9th of May, during parade, if Ukrainians attack the Red Square, or if Ukrainians attack parade itself or the Kremlin, then the Russians will strike back, and the Russians won't look at the situation if there are European politicals on the territory of Ukraine. So this is the most important thing, and it seems that the European politicals are hesitating right now. As of the beginning of the 7th of May of 2026, we haven't received even a single confirmation that anybody is going to visit Ukraine this year, which means that Zelensky has less and less space for maneuvers, because if nobody comes, of course it will be very difficult for him to make this decision to attack the territory of Russia. Of course, as of the 7th of May, he does everything possible to make this strike possible during the 8th and the 9th of May. We are talking about massive attack from the Ukrainian side, but I believe that if nobody from Europe visits Ukraine between the 8th and the 9th of May, then Zelensky will not attack the territory of Russia, because it will be too dangerous for him. As for the massive attack, once again, Zelensky does everything he can with the purpose to make this attack on the 9th of May possible. And first of all, Zelensky and Ukraine is trying to create corridors, of course, in the direction of the city of Moscow. Every single day, the Ukrainians send hundreds of drones in the direction of the city. The Ukrainians are trying to overload the Russian air defense forces. The Russians are trying to force the Russians to use as many as possible missiles, air defense vehicles, and so on. As we discussed, this is the approximate map of positions of air defense forces through the city of Moscow. We see hundreds of points, which means that Moscow is ready. But once again, whether Zelensky is ready or not, we will understand in coming probably even hours. As of the previous nights, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation stated that between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. of the 7th of May, the Ukrainians launched more than 300 drones, and the Russians destroyed 347 drones over different parts of the Russian Federation. So once again, the Ukrainians are trying to stress, overload, and to exhaust, of course, and to force the Russians to waste missiles. This morning, the Ukrainians continued attacking the territory of the Russian Federation, trying to do the same thing. And this morning, we received several videos from the central part of Russia, from the city of Perm. Here we have the Perm refinery oil base was damaged once again. This refinery was damaged by the Ukrainians several days ago, and now they repeat the strike. And as you can see, we have very heavy explosion, fire, and so on. So, but yet not a single confirmation from the European countries that they will come, which means that everything can change just in the evening, today in the evening of the 7th of May of 2026. Of course, the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine as well, and today the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, this morning, they stated that the Russians during the previous night used 102 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine. Lots of explosions were recorded, and we have lots of interesting updates. First of all, explosions were recorded in the most western parts of Ukraine. Here we can see the Russian drone, a Russian drone of a Geran type that was moving around the settlement by the name of Rivne. And here we can see how the Ukrainians using MiG-29s were brought down the Russian drone in this area with air-to-air missile. Very expensive, by the way, approach from the Ukrainian side. Here we have another video also from the western parts of Ukraine. Here we can see consequences of attacks. Several facilities, as you can see, were damaged and destroyed. But the most important attack took place probably in the area between the Baltic states and the Leningrad region. This attack, according to sources, related to the Ukrainian massive attack. And here we have a video. For example, here we have a Ukrainian drone that was, as reported, flying over the territory of Latvia. But telling the truth, I can't say that this is the Ukrainian drone. It's more correct to say that this is the drone of someone's drone that was produced probably from using Ukrainian parts, so maybe even on the territory of Ukraine. And the sources are saying that using this drone, the Ukrainians, somebody attacked some facilities and oil refineries on the territory of Latvia. So this is also a very clear signal that was sent to the Baltic states. If they continue providing their airspace to Ukraine, Ukraine or to a third party, then most likely we'll see more and more cases of the type when drones of Ukrainian production would be spotted in the airspace of the state attacking facilities and first of all energy facilities of this country. Most likely this is a very strong message, and obviously I think that the leaders of Baltic state will understand this message despite the fact who exactly was attacking them, either the Ukrainian side or the Russian side. Furthermore, lots of explosions, lots of attacks were recorded in the southern regions. Drones were recorded in the area of the settlement of Kryvyi Rog. Explosions were recorded in the area of the settlement by the name of Samar. This video was published this morning. Here we can see a black smoke over some object of energy infrastructure in the most northern parts or through the railway station. So the Russians continue attacking the territory of Ukraine, and as we can see, the Russians have ignored completely the Ukrainian ceasefire. And now we are just several hours before the beginning of the Russian ceasefire, and then we will understand everything. But according to the statements and things that the Russians are doing right now, and according to the behavior of the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, it seems that something is going to happen. Most likely, the parties will not be able to avoid another round of escalation. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. We have changes, and first let's talk about the Sumy direction. During the previous nights, small changes were recorded in the settlement of Kavsharovka and through the northern parts of Podoli. These are the changes on the ground. Just different mappers clarified the situation by removing either both gray zones or infiltrated areas. Now let's talk about the Lyman direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. This is the situation by the end of the 6th of May, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 7th of May of 2026. The Russians, according to several sources, improved their position significantly to the south of the city of Lyman. Currently, decisive clashes are taking place for the settlement of Stary Karavan, and according to these changes, we see that the Russians continue advancing further in the direction of the settlement of Shurova. It seems that the Russians don't want to answer the city of Lyman itself. They don't want to fight for the city. They prefer to continue encirclement of the settlement, and as of the current configuration, if the current configuration of this exact situation on the ground, then the Ukrainians have less and less space for maneuvers for logistics, supply and support. I would like to remind you that this is the only line that Ukrainians still can use for the logistic purposes, but very difficult to imagine how this small line under complete control of the Russian from the Russian side can supply support the entire contingent through the city of Lyman itself. Once again, these are the changes. The Russians continue advancing. In coming days, we'll receive more updates. Most likely, sooner or later, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. It seems that the Russians are not fighting for the city of Lyman itself inside of the city because they want to save the city. And the encirclement most likely will allow the Russians to save probably 20 or 30% of the city and not to lose the settlement completely under aviation bombardments and artillery strikes. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions on the Ukrainian side of the river of Seversky Donets in the area of the settlement of Piskunovka. Just several days ago, we received a video with the Russian flag in the most central part of the settlement, and today we received an update that the Russians improved their positions and they continue offensive operation further. And according to these changes on the ground, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Nikolaevka. The city of Konstantinovka, small changes were recorded, published by different sources, but nothing special. The clashes in this area continue. As for the Dobropillia direction, Drushkovka Dobropillia, here we have changes. The Russian sources continue their offensive operation in the northern direction according to different reliable sources, and the Russians continue advancing towards the next defense layer with the purpose to cut the logistic and just connections between the settlements of Drushkovka and Dobropillia between them. In coming days, we await additional changes on the ground. As for the southwestern Dobropillia direction, the Russians, according to different sources, continue their offensive operation further in the western direction towards the settlement of Sergeyevka. The Russians are trying to outflank the settlement of Sergeyevka from the north. It seems that now the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over these territories, and when it happens, the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the southwestern direction with the purpose to attack the settlement of Sergeyevka from behind. So this is the current situation in this region. The Russians, according to information we have established almost complete control over the settlement of Novopalovka. The Ukrainians control just the territory along TO 428 road, right in the area of the exit of the city. The Zaporizhzhia direction, these days we continue receiving updates about the situation in the area of Stepnohirsk, and this information was confirmed by many sources, by pro-Ukrainian sources, by neutral mappers, by pro-Western sources, and according to these updates, the Ukrainians, as a result of a counter-offensive operation, managed to improve their positions significantly in the area of the settlements of Stepnohirsk and Kamenskaya. Furthermore, the Ukrainians answered the settlement of Stepnohirsk from the north, and currently there are very heavy clashes for this area. The Russians, under the pressure of the armed forces of Ukraine, were forced to fall back from the territories to the north of Stepnohirsk and retreat towards the settlement of Kamenskaya. So as of the beginning of the 7th of May of 2026, we haven't received videos that can confirm this, but probably if the Ukrainians return control over the city of Stepnohirsk, most likely we will receive lots of updates and videos on this matter. And that's it for the short video. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.